All right, welcome back to Anxiety Coach Reacts. My name is Coach Jordan Hargrave. Today we're going to be listening to a video titled How I Got Rid of My DPDR.
My depersonalization and derealization. How I got rid of my depersonalization and derealization. So put simply, DPDR is either when it feels like the world around you is fake or you're living in a dream, or as if you're disconnected from yourself, like you're seeing your life from the outside.
Yeah, I went through depersonalization realization 2 years, 24/7, 5 years off and on, without question, the most terrifying symptoms that I ever experienced. But I want to point out, I wasn't just experiencing depersonalization realization. I also was having severe anxiety and panic attacks, developed severe existential OCD, health anxiety, had about every irrational fear that you could imagine. Time felt distorted, memory issues, and so many other symptoms. It's just that out of all of those symptoms, depersonalization realization were by far the most terrifying and weird, and so that's why they get a lot of attention. But these symptoms happen whenever you've become overwhelmed in your nervous system. All right, so the way that our nervous system works, whenever our brain perceives threat or there's an actual threat, we will actually look to other people to try to calm us down. If that doesn't work, then we go into fight or flight response. If that doesn't work, then we go into the freeze response, which is the most ancient response. And it's during this freeze response that part of what your nervous system starts to do, technically the dorsal vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system, is prepare you just in case you get eaten by a lion, because the freeze response is not even exclusive to human beings. It's actually a mammalian defense mechanism, and its purpose is to play dead. Its purpose is to pretend that you're dead, become very frozen, because predators prioritize a prey that puts up a fight, and if you appear to be dead, the predator may lose interest and walk away. But just in case it doesn't lose interest and walk away, your nervous system will make you feel separated from your body, like it's a separate entity. And then reality may start to feel fake and dreamlike. And these are dissociative symptoms. Dissociation comes from a Latin root word that means to sever or separate, and it's basically nature's last gift. If you're going to be eaten by the lion, you might as well not feel it. Technically, your brain is shutting down something that Bessel van der Kolk calls the mohawk of self-awareness. It's a series of brain structures that resemble a mohawk that are responsible for you feeling connected to your body and also the material world. And these symptoms are extremely terrifying, bizarre, and I always tell people, these symptoms would have to be severe enough to dissociate you if you were dying. Think about how severe that would have to be, right? So people say, man, like my depersonalization realization makes me feel like death. Well, that's because your brain thinks that you're dying because you've probably had a pretty long history of stress and it's all built up, which would be kind of a complex trauma situation. You could have just had one singular situation that overwhelmed your nervous system and had a relatively calm history. That does happen. I work with clients like that too. But typically whenever somebody's working with me and it's been prolonged depersonalization realization and other symptoms of the freeze response for several months or several years, usually once we go over their history, even going back to childhood, but not always, they've had a pretty rough life, okay? Disproportionately more stress than the average person. But anyway, these symptoms are safe. They are absolutely terrifying, but it is your brain trying to protect you. And the symptoms really become a distraction because we think, because the symptoms are so terrifying, that they must be the root issue. We kind of use deductive reasoning. And we spend all of our time trying to get rid of the symptoms. That's what I did whenever I was suffering. And that's what my clients do for a long time before we get educated about this, is we try to directly get rid of symptoms that are actually biologically correct whenever your nervous system is overwhelmed. And so what we need to do is we need to get you back in your body. This is called interoception, the experience of the embodied self. We need to befriend the body. And usually people need a lot of co-regulation while they're going through that process because it's very up and down, right? Co-regulation is this understanding that people heal people. Again, the very first thing that we look to help us whenever we feel threatened is people. That's actually 45% of recovery according to hundreds of studies that were done. People heal people. But anyway, you learn how to self-regulate, you learn how to release the buildup, but then you have to set up your life so that you're not driving your body into the ground. Okay, it's really, really important. The body can only take so much. You are not a machine. You have to have boundaries for sure and prioritize health and wellness in general too. Anyway, let's continue with this guy who has a really cool accent.
Now we know that this is usually caused by anxiety and stress. It's thought to be a way of numbing your mind.
So, you typically do hear that this is a symptom of anxiety, but it's not a symptom of anxiety. These symptoms don't show up until the point of traumatic stress, and they're actually produced by the dorsal vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system, whereas anxiety and stress are produced by the sympathetic nervous system. So it's a different branch of the autonomic nervous system. Also, these symptoms, again, don't happen until you feel trapped. You feel overwhelmed in your nervous system, like you can't escape. That's whenever you transition from fight or flight response into the freeze response. Although, again, most people are still going to be in fight or flight response unless you reach the deepest state of trauma. That's where you're just in the freeze response. That's where, and you might go into this state at times where it's literally just, you might just kind of steer off into space. You actually feel calm. It's called state 4 severe trauma. And I work with clients that have been in this state or are in this state all the time. In fact, I will never forget being in that state. It's quite comfortable, although very, very terrifying and something that you don't want to be in whenever you're just coming out of extreme, overwhelming stress and maybe panic and all kinds of terrifying symptoms. It actually can feel calm and it actually can be quite a relief. Now, again, we don't want to stay in that state, but it's literally, you're just completely numb. You're just kind of like tunnel vision, I just don't really have much, yeah. It appears like you're calm, and a lot of people mistake that for calm, but they're actually numb. So you've probably heard of, people getting into a car accident and suddenly, they can just like, or let's say there's like a multiple car pileup and there's somebody that's able to just like pull people out of cars and do all these super heroic things. And you're like, how did they do that? Well, they were probably numb. They probably weren't feeling pain. They weren't feeling afraid because they were in state 4 severe trauma. But also from an experiential perspective, a lot of my clients, and this definitely was me as well, I had dealt with anxiety for many years before DPDR showed up during a bad marijuana experience, at least initially. And from an experiential perspective, depersonalization, realization, as well as the other symptoms of traumatic stress are just significantly worse than the symptoms of anxiety. Not trying to minimize anxiety. I mean, anxiety is absolutely miserable. But once you get into the freeze response, it is like a different universe of severity. It literally feels like death. And so for all those reasons, it's like, people, like, if you zoom way out, I get where people are coming from. Like, it's a symptom of anxiety. They're just saying, like, hey, this is from the nervous system, which is good because they're educating people. But even so, I think it is important to properly represent these symptoms and show how severe they are by identifying the part of the nervous system that they come from, why they happen. You're not just dealing with anxiety. You are literally overwhelmed in your nervous system. And from an experiential perspective, they literally feel like death because your brain thinks you are dying. Not saying you are, but I'm saying your brain thinks that you are because your nervous system and body are so exhausted and overwhelmed.
You can react in dangerous situations.
There you go.
So if you had to fight for your life or something, detaching kind of makes it easier to deal with whatever situation you're going through. And
Right.
then afterwards, you go back to normal. But in the world we live in now, our stress response...
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Non-human mammals go in and out of these symptoms all the time in the wild. They have the same basic autonomic nervous system as us, but they respond correctly to these states and do the right things, and then we don't sometimes. The average person can usually get out of these symptoms within 30 days. Okay, it's technically not considered an issue until it's been more than 30 days. And one thing in particular with DPDR, if people kind of latch onto the symptoms and obsess over them and build their whole world around trying to get rid of them and research them and all of these things, and they're afraid of them, that is one of the layers. I want to be clear, that's not the only layer that has to be addressed, but that definitely is one of the layers that causes some people to not be able to de-escalate their nervous system, whereas non-human mammals have no issue coming out of these symptoms very quickly. Another thing is non-human mammals get co-regulation. Elephants will kind of, slap their trunks together. Monkeys will groom themselves. Non-human mammals get co-regulation to calm themselves down after they had some sort of, attack by an apex predator, something like that. They automatically start to slow their breathing. They calm their body. They go back to living life. And they don't even have the cognitive capacity to obsess over these symptoms or overthink them. They don't avoid anything. So they do everything right. Whereas sometimes we do everything wrong. We go into reaction mode. And even though, part of what separates us from non-human mammals is our ability to think right? Logically, creatively, contextually, and we can visualize the future before it happens and things like that, it actually can become a curse in the sense that we can use these things to actually prevent our nervous system from downregulating. And that's basically what I help my clients do. This is what I have to do, is basically mirror non-human mammals' response to stress and trauma, because they don't stay stuck and we do. Okay, so instead of avoidance, we do exposure. Instead of keeping this tension, adrenaline, and emotion in our body because we suppress it, we release it. Instead of trying to fight this alone, you get co-regulation, and the list goes on and on and on. And then we have to do something called cognitive restructuring, which is what we're doing now, where you get the right neuroscience, rewire your mind to detach fear and shame. Non-human mammals don't have to do that because they never, overthink the symptoms to begin with, which is a blessing for them.
Fight or flight gets activated for things that it hasn't really evolved for. And if you already have anxiety,
so this wouldn't just be fight or flight. Again, this is the freeze response, but yeah.
then you're likely very hyper aware. Like you notice every change that happens in your body. And so something might trigger that stress response, and suddenly you pick up on this feeling. Or maybe you just noticed it after a stressful. But this is where the problem arises, because it's such an unnerving and scary feeling. You now have attached a sense of danger to this feeling.
Yes.
So
that's what we're talking about. You start to condition your brain through neuroplasticity to believe that depersonalization, realization are a threat because you're tightening up your body and you're obsessing over them and you're avoiding things that cause symptoms, and you're looking on Reddit and YouTube and Facebook groups and all these places, and you see all these scary stories of people that have still been suffering. I remember whenever I came across those stories and I'm like, oh my gosh, is that going to be me? And you're watching video after video trying to look for that one thing that's going to fix this, whenever in reality there's a lot of layers to this. We've already gone over some of them. But yeah, he's absolutely right. The safe symptoms get conditioned to be associated with threat because of our resistance towards them and our obsession with them and our avoidance of things that may cause the symptoms.
It causes you more anxiety and stress, which further activates your stress response. And what's part of that response? Depersonalization and derealization. So it's basically a self-fulfilling loop. The more scared you are of this feeling, the more you're going to feel this feeling.
Okay, so I'm about to do another reaction video to a very old video that somebody did that's very, very popular on YouTube. And I think overall it's a great video. And it basically makes this same claim that if you'll just stop obsessing over DPDR, it'll go away. I wish that that were the case, okay? I've now worked with thousands of DPDR sufferers for the last 7 years, and I can tell you that while this is a layer that we need to address through education, through starting to calm the body, starting to invite it in, that's a very small part of what I teach people, but it is a part of it. I wish that that were enough. There's so many other things that we need to address. Again, teaching people how to self-regulate, release the tension, adrenaline, and emotion from their body, face sensory, somatic, and symptom triggers, make appropriate lifestyle adjustments. People need a lot of co-regulation. They need a lot of education about this. And then there's usually, 2, 3, 4 unique layers to that individual. Like I'm helping somebody heal from narcissistic abuse right now. That has a lot of very specific effects on people that dysregulate their nervous system. There's all kinds of very specific situations that come up as well. I wish that it were as simple as just not being afraid of the symptoms, but I'm telling you, it's not that simple for a lot of people. For some people, maybe that's like the main layer of stress, is that they're just obsessing over the symptoms. And for that person, if they can get out of the symptoms by discontinuing obsessing, that's great. But to say that that's going to be the case for everybody is just not accurate, unfortunately. I wish it was that simple.
I was constantly looking for a way to get rid of this horrible fake feeling. I'd wake up and be so confused and just cry because I wanted to get rid of it. But I wanted to get rid of it because I was so scared of it. So I was stuck in the cycle, constantly becoming triggered, releasing stress hormones throughout my body. So this feeling just wouldn't go away and would last for months, even years. So eventually I just changed everything. Instead of trying to get rid of it, I actually encouraged it to get rid of it.
Yeah, so this is acceptance, right? Which is not bad. In fact, it's not only not bad, it's good. But I've actually got a client that I'm working with right now. She did acceptance for a very, very, very long time, and she's just been so frustrated that her symptoms are still there. She's like, Jordan, I've spent years doing, technically, well, I won't say the name of it, just, I want to celebrate the acceptance movement while also saying that it's not enough for a lot of people. And I'm saying that actually from personal experience too. I came across acceptance, and for a while, aggressively inviting in my symptoms, got rid of panic attacks. DPDR didn't happen so much. Severe anxiety wasn't there for a while, but then I went through religious trauma. I went through narcissistic abuse. I continued to suppress my emotions. My sleep was terrible. My nutrition was terrible. I didn't hydrate. I didn't have boundaries. I was a people pleaser. And it was like a snowball, and everything built up. And guess what? I tried what he's talking about years later, and it did nothing. I assumed that it was going to work because it did the first time, and it didn't work. And this is not just my anecdotal experience. I've seen this with thousands of people around the world, that acceptance may work for a little while if the primary layer is resistance, but over time, your body is going to accumulate with a lot of stress and a lot of fatigue if we don't put these other things in place, if we don't address these other layers, and it's just not going to be enough in the long term. Am I glad that people feel better for a while? Yeah, but unfortunately, I promise you that's not going to be enough.
Worse. I would even speak to it. When I felt particularly bad, I would say, okay, how much more fake can I feel? How much more do you got? Do your worst. And I would just invite it like it was my friend, and I did not care one bit if I felt this way. And
Right.
over time,
Acceptance,
I
invitation.
did stop caring. I started getting little breaks where I felt normal for even just a minute.
Which is awesome, by the way. Also, he has really cool dreadlocks. A cool accent, cool dreadlocks. Yeah, like, and this guy is teaching something that's amazing. Like, again, for that layer of resistance, invitation is powerful, but people present it as if it's enough for everybody to rewire their nervous system, and it's just not. And I'm speaking from a lot of personal experience, as well as the experience of having worked with thousands of people over the last 7 years that have done this exact same thing, whether it's Clara Weeks, the Dare Method, the book At Last a Life, or this thing or that thing. And they saw results for a little while, but they didn't last, or they weren't able to see results at all because there was just too much buildup in the nervous system. And also, what I tell people is, acceptance can't be enough, because if you think about it, you have to have symptoms to start resisting. So why were the symptoms there to begin with? If the only issue is your resistance of the symptoms, and that's all you need to address, well, then that would mean that your symptoms just happen randomly, but they didn't happen randomly. They happened because your body started to go into fight or flight response, eventually probably built up to the freeze response, which is whenever you hit that overwhelm point, it's literally like filling up water in a glass. Or again, it could have been a singular situation, which is called a major trauma, and you were calm before that, but most people have a pretty stressful history. It all built up. So your body was probably going into fight or flight response for a while, and you didn't address that. And don't feel ashamed for that, because you just didn't know how. You didn't self-regulate. You didn't have enough self-care in your life, and then you started to live in your head. That's what I did. I wasn't even aware I had a body. I always tell people it's like I was just like a brain floating around. I basically was uncomfortable having something called interoception, which was the experience of the embodied self. And so I lived in my head, and then I numbed my body in various ways. And so if you're up here and your sensory triggers around you, which you have a lot of them, are putting your body into fight or flight over and over again, well, the way that a neural pathway works is every time it fires, it gets more efficient and faster at putting your body into whatever the response is that the neural pathway is firing. So if it's fight or flight, every time that you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, feel something that is sensorially similar to that painful past experience that created that sensory trigger, your body is getting more and more efficient at going into fight or flight. And it's just like filling up a cup of water. Eventually, you will hit that overwhelm point, and suddenly you can't drink four cups of coffee or Red Bull, and you can't muscle your way through anymore. And all of a sudden, the things that you used to do that would calm you down, like acceptance or just hitting the gym or just, getting a couple nights sleep or whatever, or taking a few days off, suddenly all that stuff's not working anymore. And it's because at this point, there's too much buildup. We have to address all the layers. Recovery is hard. It just is. And it takes time. It's frustrating. It's very up and down, but it's doable. And the beautiful thing about this is once you take the time to address those layers, living a preventative lifestyle is really easy, and you're going to enjoy it because you're like, okay, all I got to do is this, this, and this. I just need to listen to my body, have boundaries, self-regulate, have self-care, and I can prevent this from coming back. Like, I consider it a great privilege to do the things that I do to take care of my nervous system. And yeah, there is a cost sometimes. You're going to have to say no to people sometimes. You're going to have to give up money sometimes. You're going to have to give up people's opinions sometimes. And you have to invest time every day. But it's not anything compared to the benefit that you get, okay?
And then a minute turned to 5, and then 5 turned to 10.
Right?
And it kept going until eventually I noticed that I was feeling normal more often than not because
Which
I
is amazing. And I love this for this guy. Love this.
wanted this to happen because I wasn't afraid of feeling this way. And that told my body that, hey, there's nothing to be scared of, there's nothing to be stressed about, so I don't need to react this way. And now I only feel it when I'm particularly stressed, and even then I really don't care. And
Okay, so notice he just said that he still experiences the symptoms because he never addressed the actual root causes, the multiple layers that were overwhelming his nervous system. So he shaved off the layer of resistance. And so what's happening now is he's still experiencing the symptoms, but he just doesn't care about them. Is that really what we want? You know, like if you're having severe marriage issues, it's like, well, you know, my wife and I are still fighting all the time, but I just don't care about it. It's like, no, we want to build connection. We want to take the time to address, you know, the many layers that are causing that disconnect with your spouse. A lot of these people are helping people in the sense of like, I'm glad they're getting out there and saying, hey, you know, invite in your symptoms, but they're presenting it a lot of times as if that's all you need to do, and that is going to set people up for failure in the long term. And especially if they're not even recovered themselves, like you guys see how it's a problem, okay? And so I hate to be the bearer of bad news, you know, and whenever people initially work with me, they're like, man, like you're asking us to address a lot. You mean I got to face my emotions and I have to face my sensory, somatic, and symptom triggers? I got to clean up my diet. I got to, you know, start hydrating. I got to prioritize sleep. I got to set up some boundaries in my life. I have to, you know, get out of my head and go through the long process of building interoception. I need a lot of co-regulation through this. Like I need to get a lot of, you know, neuroscience so I can detach fear and shame. They're like, this is a lot of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, of course it is. Your nervous system is literally overwhelmed right now. It did not happen overnight, and healing is also not going to happen overnight. But I'm telling you, the work is worth it, okay? Because you get to have that certainty and that confidence that you don't have to worry about this coming back, and you definitely don't have to manage symptoms, which is apparently what this person is doing. I'm thankful for this person. But notice this video has 78,000 hearts, and this person is still struggling with symptoms and says that whenever they show up, they're just not as bothered by them. Like, guys, I don't believe that the best that you can do is manage symptoms. I believe that if you will put in the time and the energy to deal with these multiple layers, you can recover. And that's what has to happen for you to truly, truly see long-term results. Okay? Anyway,
it lasts about 30 seconds. So I hope this makes sense. I hope this
yeah,
helps.
so he's gotten it to where his DPDR only lasts 30 seconds and he's not afraid of it. So that's good, and that's working towards recovery, but this is like he said how I got rid of depersonalization realization. So he didn't get rid of it. He got it to the point where it only happens sometimes and he's not afraid of it. So anyway, that's why I'm doing these reaction videos, is I want to honor the good part, which is this guy is clearly helping people, very encouraging, and I love the acceptance part of it. But I want to speak to the opportunity for growth, which is like, hey, number one, I'm actually like, I'm not glad that he's suffering. Obviously, that's horrible, and I hope that he addresses these other layers. But I'm actually glad that this video demonstrated what I was saying, so you don't have to take it, you know, for my word. That's what happens when you don't address the other layers. Is you're only going to be able to manage symptoms and not see permanent long-term recovery. Okay. So anyway, with that being said, click like, help me get this video out to the algorithm, and subscribe if you want more videos like this. And I hope you have an amazing day.